Hi, I'm Debbie and this is Book and Bujo. Welcome if you're new and welcome back if you've been here before. This is where I talk about all things books, bullet journals, and stationery. I'm so glad you've joined me today because the Our Fantasy Bingo for 2024 is out now and I'm excited to share my TBR. Alright, so we have the 2024 bingo board. I'm so excited. Let me scooch over here a little bit so I can have it up on the screen here for you. Hopefully I can get it big enough so you can read what all of the prompts are, but I will go over each one and tell you the books I plan to read, though it may change throughout the year as I read some books that end up fitting the prompt that I don't know about, because some of them you don't necessarily know until you've read the book, right? That's what happened last year. But these are the ones I hope to read for each of these prompts. So there's 3 different ways you can do Our Fantasy Bingo. The first one is just to read a book for each of the different prompts, and there you go. And that's just regular mode. And then a second way is hard mode. So basically there's the regular prompt plus an additional prompt to go along with that, and that gives you your hard mode. And then there is the third way, which is hero mode, and that is to review every single book that you read for Our Fantasy Bingo. And since I am here on BookTube, I review all of my books anyway, as well as on Goodreads and Storygraph, and I will leave my links down below if you want to follow me on either of those. I would love to be your friend on Goodreads or Storygraph if you're on there as well. So you can check me out on those and see all of the reviews for all the books that I read for Our Fantasy Bingo. Our Fantasy Bingo runs from April 1st to the following March 31st. So we just completed the April 1st, 2023 to March 31st, 2024. And now we are starting the April 1st, 2024 through March 31st, 2025. A couple of rules is 1 book per prompt, so no doubling up. You can only read one author throughout all of the prompts. You can only use the author once for a prompt. You can't use, you can't read all of the Stormlight archives and put Brandon Sanderson on here for 4 or 5 different prompts. You can only use him for one prompt. And then you can use Christopher Paolini for another prompt. You can use Stephen King for a prompt. You can't use the same author for multiple prompts, as well as no doubling up on books, no doubling up on your author. Some of these I definitely will need your help with choosing some books. I have an idea of some books, but maybe just 1 or 2 I'm pretty sure fit the prompts, but maybe not. So if you happen to know a better book or a really good book that will fit one of the prompts that I am unsure about, please let me know down in the comments. I would love to check them out. Let's get started. Prompt number 1, first in a series. And hard mode, that series has to have 3 or more books in the series. This one is fairly easy. The first in the series, you want to read the first book, so some ones that are most definitely more than 3 books. You have, of course, The Realm of the Elderlings with Robin Hobb. If you have not read Assassin's Apprentice, that is a great place to start. The Wheel of Time series would be also a good one because that one's got 14 or so books in it. Eye of the World would be a great place to start on that one by Robert Jordan. And then there's also the Discworld series, has 42 books, or 41 books? 42 books in there. So The Color of Magic would be the first book that was written. Don't necessarily need to start there. You could start with Small Gods or The Color of Magic, or just almost pick one and just start with it and go from there. They're all great. But I have read the first book in all of those series, so I will not be able to choose any of those. But there's also a lot of trilogies and books that have 4 and more, like Red Rising series. If you have not read Red Rising, that's hard to say, by Pierce Brown, I would definitely recommend that one. But I have read almost all of them. I have not read Lightbringer yet. I know Red God is coming out, and I want to wait until we're closer to that date before I read Lightbringer, because I want to do a full reread of the series. So I would probably do that either later this year or early next year before Red God comes out. I went through my top 10 series that I want to read this year and look to see what series had more than 3 books in it. And of course, the Percy Jackson universe, any of those by Rick Riordan would be a great place to start. There's multiple series. Most of them have 5 or more books in them. And the overarching series has quite a few, so you could do The Trials of Apollo, you can do Percy Jackson and Lightning Thief. That one's a great place to start. It's the one that started it all. Then we have Of Cinder and Bone by Kyoko M. Those ones are amazing. They're dragon books, and I love those. But again, I've already read the first book in all of those. The Bound and the Broken series by Ryan Cahill, Of Blood and Fire, or The Fall. They're both great places to start. Of Blood and Fire is book number 1. The Fall is a prequel novella, so it's very short, so you could try either one of those, and they're both, I would say, considered first in the series. But I have decided to either go for Spellslinger by Sebastian de Castell, because I think I have the first 2 books in it, and that one I believe has 12 books in the series. And then The Memoirs of Lady Trent by Marie Brennan. A Natural History of Dragons is the first book, and there's 6 books in the series. I wanted to do Kingfall Histories by David Estes, but I already read the first book, so that doesn't work for me, but could work for you. Spellslinger or The Memoirs of Lady Trent. You could also do Fortuna Sworn. This one is a fairly easy prompt. There's a lot of series with more than 3 books in the series. But the other one I was thinking of is Mirror Visitors series, and A Winter's Promise is the first book, and that is by Christelle Debat. And that's another one that's on the series that I would like to read, and it has 4 or 5 books in the series. So those are kind of the 3 that I would like to try and do. So let's move this along. We're still only on the first prompt. Okay, prompt number 2, an alliterative title. Regular mode, it has to have 2 of the words in the title have to have the same letter. So that is super easy, like Red Rising, super easy. But hard mode, there has to be 3 words that start with the same letter. So this one, it was a lot harder. I went through all of the books that I had written for the series that I want to read, and a bunch of the ones I had on my Goodreads TBR and wish list, and just, it was difficult. I'm trying to look over here, see what I've got, if I have anything that works for it. It was definitely difficult. But I did find 2 books that will definitely work that I have not read yet, and that is The Lies of Locke Lamora, and I am getting the updated Broken Binding edition, which I'm very excited about. And the Lies of Locke Lamora is the first book in the Gentleman Bastard series, I believe it's called, by Scott Lynch. The next one that definitely works is The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi, so we got the 3 A's in there. So I'm excited to try that one. And then I also heard that The Ship of Smoke and Steel is a decent book, and again has the 3 S's. So any of those will work. And prompt number 3, Under the Surface. The book takes place underground or underwater, in a cave, something like that, in a cavern system. And then the hard mode is at least 50% of the book has to take place under the surface. So one of the books that I just read that definitely works if you need some help figuring out something to read, The Girl and the Stars by Mark Lawrence. It's the first book in the Book of the Ice series, and the majority of it takes place in caverns underneath the ice. So that one works really well. And then we have Wool, and that one, it takes place in underground caverns. I've also heard Flames of Mira would work for this. A couple others that I read was Rolling in the Deep. Definitely works because it mainly takes place underwater. The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling is another great one that takes place underground. I've heard The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin also works. I'm not sure, have not read it yet. So that's on my list of ones that could work. I also have on here Sleeping Giants and Neverwhere, as well as From Below. Don't really know much about it, but just the title itself sounds like something underground. As well as The Starless Sea. I've also heard that it is underwater. If you know for sure that any of these fit the prompt for hard mode, at least 50% of the book takes place under the surface, let me know down in the comments. And if you have a better suggestion, then let me know that as well. Okay, prompt number 4. Criminals. Hard mode features a heist. Now, I definitely know that Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo both work. But of course I have read those already, although it's been a couple years, so I wouldn't mind giving them a reread, but there are some other books that I would definitely like to get to. And one of them that fits this prompt also fits one of the other prompts, but that's The Lies of Lamora by Scott Lynch. I also heard that the first book in the Riaria, the more I say it, the less it sounds correct. Riaria Chronicles by Michael J. Sullivan. Oh my gosh, totally blanked on that. Okay, so the Riaria series by Michael J. Sullivan. I've heard the first book works for this, that it's criminals and they have a heist. The Palace Job works for this, as well as Foundry Side and Black Tongue Thief. So there's quite a few on there that I have had on my TBR for a while. I do love me a good heist. Loved heist movies and books with heists in them. They're just too much fun. So one of those I will definitely be choosing for this prompt. Prompt number 5, dreams. And hard mode is they can't be mystical or unusual dreams. It have to be just a mundane dream or nightmare. This one is a lot harder to figure out before reading the book. So I think I'm hoping that as I read books, I may happen to find someone that dreams and then I can use it. But if you know one for sure, please let me know. I would love to find a book for this that I know has dreams in it instead of just reading randomly. But I have heard that the second book in the Raven cycle would work as... Row number 2, prompt number 6, entitled animals. So basically the title needs to have an animal in it. And then for hard mode, it needs to be some kind of fantastical creature, something you would find in fantasy or sci-fi. And of course with all the dragon books that I read, there's definitely, Reign of the Dragon Queen would be a good one for this one. I'll have to see what this second book is called. I'm not sure, because that's the first book in the series, but that one was great. A Natural History of Dragons, again, Marie Brennan's book. Her first book works. So actually any of the books in that series, if you haven't read all of them, you can read any one of them, and that would work for this prompt. As well as American Hippo. It just looked intriguing. My parents loved hippos. So that one would be kind of fun, and they're also kind of a very interesting animal. The Rage of Dragons would work. Dragonfall, which is the second book in the Kingfall Histories by David Estes. That one would work, and it's actually on my TBR for April, so that one could count. Dragon Rider, there's a whole lot of different dragon type books, and as well as just normal animal name books out there. Prompt 7, bards. So the protagonist needs to be a storyteller or a musician. And hard mode is they have to specifically be called a bard. So I'm not sure, since it's not necessarily the main character, because Geralt, of course, is the main character, but Dandelion in the Witcher series is a bard and is called a bard. So you could possibly read one of those books. And I've actually seen quite a few different books out there that would work. Bloody Rose, which is the sequel to Kings of the Wild, which is the banned series. And I would love to get back into that. I believe it's by Nicholas Eames. And I've read the first one, loved it. And I would love to get into the second book, Bloody Rose. We also have A River Enchanted. I heard that that one would work. The Bards of the Bone Plain. Sounds kind of interesting. And Bard is in the title, so definitely have to have a bard in there somewhere. Bardic Voices series I've heard would work. John the Balladeer and the Bone Harp. Not sure if all of those work for the hard mode or not, but they all work for the regular prompt. Prompt number 8, prologues and epilogues. As a fantasy reader, this is fairly easy. Most fantasy books have either a prologue or an epilogue in it, but for hard mode, you have to have both. Sometimes that's a little harder to find. Most Wheel of Time books have at least one or the other. Some of the books have both. The one I'm reading this month only has a prologue, so that won't work. A lot of the Joe Abercrombie books also tend to have a prologue and an epilogue, so I'm up to The Trouble with Peace, which is the second book in the Age of Madness. And let's see. Oh, this one does not have a prologue. Does it have an epilogue in it? It does not look like it. It does have a footnote to history, but there's another chapter after that. Nope. This one doesn't have either in it either. But I am currently reading Peace and Turmoil by Elliot Brooks, and she has both a prologue and an epilogue, so I will definitely be able to count that one. Most of the Kingfall Histories books have a prologue and an epilogue. Some of them just have a prologue and then they have backstories for some of the characters. It's not necessarily specifically called an epilogue, so I don't know if you could count those. The Expanse, I heard, has both. City of Stardust has both, as well as The Art of Prophecy, and all of those sound amazing. Prompt number 9, self-published or indie published, which is pretty awesome because there are a lot of amazing indie authors out there and self-pub authors. Of Blood and Fire, Ryan Cahill definitely works. His entire series so far has been self-published. David Estes, another of my favorite authors. The Fate Mark series, Kingfall Histories, Slip series, those are all independently published. But for hard mode, the self-published has to have fewer than 100 ratings on Goodreads, which is great, but the book that I read that has 79 ratings on Goodreads, I finished at the end of March. So I don't get to count that one. So I'll need to find a different one. Or if you want to read an indie author, they have to have done an AMA with our fantasy. So I did find some options. The Fangs of War works, so I may have to try and fit this one in May before people start reading it a little more often. And I mean, it is such a beautiful edition. Now I've heard good things about this one. And I believe that might actually be a debut as well for the author, E.J. Doble. Origins of a Guildmaster would also work for this one. And Fairy Godmothers and Other Tales. Now this one's a little bit weird because it is from like way back in like the 1800s, I believe. But a lot of the editions and the edition I have are independently published, and there are less than 100 ratings on Goodreads. And that is by Mrs. Alfred Gaddy. Moving on to prompt 10. Last one in second line. A romantasy. And for hard mode, the main characters need to be LGBTQIA+. This one actually was fairly easy as well for me to find. And some options are The Captive Prince, Winter's Orbit, could do Feybound, maybe Wolf Song by T.J. Klune, The Witching Moon, Legends and Lattes. Yes, I have not read that yet, so I could do Legends and Lattes. That would be a great one. For number 3, we have prompt 11, Dark Academia, which there's so many Dark Academia books out there that are really good, like the Atlas 6 right here. That would be a good one. And we also have the Atlas Paradox right next to it. That one could work. But hard mode is it has to be a mundane school, which makes it a little harder. Some that could work. Ninth House, I've heard The Magicians works for that. Summer Sons, The Historian, Plain Bad Heroines, could definitely do The Raven Boys, which I want to keep reading through that series. I've only read the first books so far. And Education in Malice, I heard, is also a mundane school. There are so many fantasy schools out there. You've got, you know, Harry Potter, you have Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. There's a whole bunch of magical schools out there, but finding a Dark Academia that's also just a mundane school, that one's a little bit harder. I think The Secret History could work by Donna Tartt. Prompt 12, multi-POV. And the hard mode is it has to have 5 or more POVs in the story, which actually wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be because David Estes tends to write multiple POV characters throughout his stories. So Fate Marked, there is over 6 in each throughout the book. I think that throughout the whole series it probably got up to 10 or more POVs. And his Kingfall Histories is the same way. So I can read Dragonfall, which is on my TBR for this month, or I can read Magefall, which is the 3rd book in the series. And Kingfall Histories, I believe, had 6 or 7 POVs in it. And it's really nice because at the beginning of each part, so you have each section, which is multiple chapters, he tells you what POVs are in those chapters. And then as the chapter heading, he tells you what POVs are in that particular chapter, and it pretty much, the section, that portion ends, and there's a title. It says, okay, now we're back to Samson, now we're to Roan, now we're to Peony, and it makes it really easy to jump from character to character. And Of Blood and Fire pretty much, here we go, Of Blood and Fire pretty much only has the one POV, but as you move through this series of Darkness and Light and of War and Ruin, you get more and more POVs. So if you've already started that series, you can continue on and that would work. And then of course Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom also have 5 or more POVs in the books. Wheel of Time could also work because there's definitely 5 or more POVs in that series. The Wizard of the Crow I heard works, as well as Spinning Silver. Prompt 13, a book published in 2024, and the hard mode is it has to also be a debut. This one was a little harder for me to figure out what book I wanted to read because some books aren't out yet and I don't necessarily know if there are debuts. I haven't done enough research into those yet. But here's some that I did find. Fathom Folk, which has already come out. I was looking at Memento Mori, and that is by Eunice Hong, but I think that's a non-fiction. And Our Fantasy Bingo is pretty much sci-fi, fantasy, speculative fiction, and horror. So that one may not work for it. I'll have to verify the genre on that one. Lady of Steel and Straw also would work. The Lamplighter and A Strange Beast. So those are the ones I'm interested in. I want to see what those ones are about and do a little more digging just to make sure it is a debut author from this year. Prompt 14, character with a disability. And hard mode is the main character has to have a physical or mental disability. So there's quite a few that I found for this one, like The Unbroken, Black Sun, Fourth Wing. I haven't read that one yet either, so that's another one that could work. Half a King, The Kingfall Histories by David Estes also works because Samson, one of the main characters, is blind. Unbounded might also work for this one. Prompt 15, book published in the 1990s. Hard mode is they have also published a book in the last 5 years. There are some authors that are still publishing. Robin Hobb from the Realm of the Elderling. She has some short stories that she's been recently published, and I believe she is currently writing another one. So I'm not sure when that one would be coming out, but that could work for you. Tad Williams is also currently publishing. Janny Wirtz, I believe, as well. They also published in the 90s. Neil Gaiman works really well for this. So any of his works from the 90s, like Sandman. That's one I'm thinking of. Daughter of the Forest could work. Sabriel, Tigana Ogai Gavral K, anything by him would work as well. So any of those authors would be a great choice for this prompt. Row 4. Prompt number 16. Orcs, Trolls, and Goblins. Oh my! And hard mode is the orc, the troll, or the goblin must be the main character. So of course that's a little harder, because there's orcs all over The Hobbit, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and a whole lot of books. There's some great trolls and orcs and goblins. Harry Potter's got goblins, but none of those are the main characters. So it did take me a little bit until I remembered, oh yeah, Legends and Lattes. Main character is an orc, or a half-orc. Hello. Easy choice. But we also have the Goblin Emperor, Orconomics. Those both work. I believe T. Kingfisher has a book out, 9 Goblins. Prompt number 17, space opera. Of course, the first thing I thought of was Red Rising, Pierce Brown. Love it. There's some great space operas out there. But if this is not your thing, it's going to be a little bit harder of a prompt for you to be able to do. But you are able to switch one prompt off of the board for 2024 with a prompt that has been on a previous board. So in case you know you just don't like space operas, you can swap it with a prompt from a previous game board, as long as it doesn't double up. So if you have 2 of them that said criminals and has to have a heist, you can't have 2 of those on your bingo board. You'd have to pick one that isn't on the 2024 bingo board at all. But the hard mode is your space opera has to be written by an author of marginalized gender or identity. The Murderbot Diaries, I believe, would work for this prompt. Wrencher's Orbit, I heard, has worked. Wayfarer's Persephone Station, Navigating the Stars, I believe all of those work for this prompt, as well as To Shape a Dragon's Breath. Prompt number 18, An Author of Color. Hard mode, it must be a debut within the last 5 years. So there's a few on here that at least one that I'm very interested in reading, that I wanted to read for the Autism Acceptance Readathon for April, but I didn't have time to get that book on there as on top of all the other books I was reading, and that is The Book Eaters. We also have KKE, not sure exactly how to say that. The Swarm, The Ghost Bride. The Conductors is another one I really want to read. Legendborn, I have heard some really good things about. Girl, Serpent, and Thorn. These Violent Delights. The Year of the Witching. There's a lot of great books for this prompt, as well as The Stardust Thief. I do own that one on my Kindle, so that one might be one that I go for. Prompt 19, Survival. And the hard mode is, it cannot be a super virus or a pandemic. The Slip series by David Estes would definitely work. It was actually a flood, so active nature, that created this more apocalyptic nation at the time of the book. Also heard Battle Royale would work if you are more into manga. Ghost Station, Powerless, The Serpent and the Wings of Night, not read that one yet. The Swarm, The Ghost Bride, Driftwood, The Space Between Worlds, Ogres, which I wonder if that would work for the Orc, Troll, and Goblin prompt too. Are ogres in that same classification? I don't know. Prompt number 20, Judge a book by its cover. The hard mode is you have to pick it based only on the cover. You cannot read the blurb. So you would only be able to pick it up and look at it and not read anything that might be on the back or anything. I mean, this one sentence on the front might be okay, but basically it has to be what the cover looks like. And then you have to read it based on that. So this one is very subjective to everyone on what they deem is a beautiful cover. What might be beautiful to me may not be quite so beautiful to someone else. So I will leave you to choose your own book for this prompt. Final row, the fifth row, prompt number 21. Set in a small town. And the hard mode is the small town can be real or fictional, but it has to be based in the real world. So it can't be on some other planet. It needs to basically be a place that's on Earth, but it doesn't have to be a real town. They can, it could be a made-up town that's like a real town. So ones that could work are Black Sheep. I've also heard the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires would also work. The Shadowhunter series by Cassandra Clare would work because those are all based in basically this world. But I'm kind of leaning towards either Starling House or the Library of Mount Char. Prompt number 22, 5 short stories, and the hard mode is to read an entire speculative fiction anthology. And I know exactly what I'm going to read for that, and that is When Swords Fall Silent. And again, there's, if you want to pause and see all the different amazing authors that are a part of this collection. But it has, there's more, there's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 short stories in this one. So I will definitely be reading this one for the anthology prompt. Another great one, if you can get your hands on it, The Advent of Winter, that was put together by Dom from Dominish Books, is amazing collection of short stories. There's 24 short stories in it, and it was beautiful. So if you can find that one, that would be a great one for this prompt as well. Prompt number 23, Eldritch Creatures. And the hard mode is it cannot be related to Cthulhu myths. So basically not a creature that H.P. Lovecraft came up with. So this one's not too hard. You could do Ring Shout, I have heard works. Hammers on Bow, Strange Beasts of China, Gog Magog, Bitter or Pet could work for this one. I did read Pet last year for the Our Fantasy Bingos. Maybe I should read Bitter this time. Sea and Shadow, the Winnowing Flame series. I do need to get to the second book in that one, so that would be a good one. A Touch of Light by Tiago Abdallah would also work, that series. It has griffins in it, and I do need to get to the second book in that one. I've read the first book and the prequel novella. So I believe I'm up to A Shade of Madness, I think is the second book. So that one's definitely on the top of my list to read for this one, or the second book in the Roaring Flame series. Prompt number 24, almost done. Reference materials. Hard mode is it has to contain at least 2 different types of reference materials in the book. So as a fantasy reader, that is pretty easy to find that one, because most fantasy books have a map, and they also have either a glossary or a pronunciation guide, some kind of appendix. Just about any of those kind of books would work. So the Wheel of Time books have them. J.R.R. Tolkien books, most of those have at least a map and some kind of glossary or pronunciation guide or appendix in them. A Natural History of Dragons has one. Watership Down. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. The Goblin Emperor for the Bone Ships have that, a couple of different things as well. And The Tainted Cup is one that a lot of people are interested in reading, so I want to find out a little bit more about that one, as well as the Bloodstones. So lots of good options to choose from. Sword of Kaigan also has a map and a guide to the different magic systems that are in there, the different houses and the magic that they contain, as well as the Mistborn series. They have both as well. And I'm pretty sure they have epilogues and prologues too. Could be wrong on that one, but I'm pretty sure. And last but not least, prompt number 25, the last space on the bingo board, and that is book club or read-along book, which in itself is pretty easy for me because I'm in a lot of read-alongs and book clubs. But the hard mode is it has to be one of the Our Fantasy read-alongs or book clubs. This one's a little harder because they do not release the books much in advance. The last week of March, they release what books they will be releasing in April, or reading in April. And at the end of April, it'll be the books for May. So we don't get a lot of heads up before we find out what the books are. So this is usually a space that I tend to try and replace with a different prompt, unless I find a book that they are reading that is also on my TBR. Last year, they had a book, and 2 months later I ended up reading it, but I was still able to take part of the discussion, because you also need to take part in the discussion of the book, and people were still talking about it, so I was able to get in there and talk about it. I think it was The Spice Road. But they do have a book in April, which sounds interesting, and that is Imperfect Magic, the first book in the series by C.N. Rowan. So that one looked kind of interesting. But they also have the Moonday Letters and the Beast Players, which sounds kind of interesting. The main thing that I participate in on the Reddit with Our Fantasy is just the Our Fantasy bingo. I'm not really on there and logged in and doing stuff all the time. So as long as I remember to go in and check what books are coming out for the next month, then I can easily participate in that. But if I forget, then I may replace that with a different prompt from last year or the year before that. I'm very excited. This is the second time that I will have been participating in Our Fantasy bingo, and this is actually the third time that I've even heard about it. So it was 3 years ago, and it was towards the end of it, so I didn't really have time to participate in it. I was super excited when I found out it was continuing again throughout every year. It's an annual readathon, and it's a year-long one, and I'm very excited to take part in it again this year. And again, if you have some book recommendations for me, that please leave them down in the comments. I would love to see what your suggestions are as well, and also let me know, are you participating in Our Fantasy bingo? I would love to find that out. So thank you so much for joining me, and please like, comment, and subscribe if you want to, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any videos from me. And until next time, keep reading. Bye!